Hey, this is Francisca and this is my mid-crisis life. So, they passed a bill yesterday for assisted suicide, assisted death. I don't know specifically what it's called. And in all honesty, I don't really know a lot about it because, as I say, I'm not really a fan of watching the news. I'm not really a fan of kind of being impregnated with fear and worry and anxiety and all of the bad things that are happening in the world. I just think that it's really important to be careful about what you're consuming on a day-to-day basis. So I don't know the ins and outs of it. And I guess unless I really want to, I'm not going to go and have a look. But I was talking to my mum about it yesterday because she's been very much against it. She's very pro-life. She does a lot of stuff for like anti-abortion stuff. And now this like anti-assisted suicide thing. And I know a lot of that. And her decision to do that is born from something maybe that she hasn't processed herself. And then this kind of like religious fanaticism that seems to have taken over her entire personality. And in all honesty, I mean, I'm not massively in disagreement with it. I've had termination, so I definitely am not speaking from any higher plane, from any pedestal. I've not placed myself anywhere in relation to pro-life, but I guess having been through that situation is not particularly nice, and I don't think that it's necessarily a type of birth control. And I think just for me, it's not actually the act itself or whether the child has rights, whether those rights supersede the rights of the mum, whether the rights of the mum supersede the rights of the child. I mean, it's not really about that. I think it's more the ease with which doing that, having terminations, killing like fetuses is how widely available it is and how easily available it is. I think that's more my issue, that it is kind of used as a form of contraception rather than in circumstances where people have really thought about it. I think when you have in the back of your mind, well, you know, I can always just take the morning after pill. I can always just go down the road and get a quick termination. It's not particularly easy. They don't ask a lot of questions. It doesn't really need to be signed off by many doctors. You know, there's not really many consequences to having unprotected sex. And also, I think with it, I mean, I don't want to get into the whole thing of it, but I think also like there is something to be said for sexual relationships and sexual intercourse being more than just the physical act. And that oftentimes children are born out of something that isn't anything further than a physical act. And then there's all of these fractured families and there's all of these children growing up without the balance of having two parents, because two parents bring two different things. They challenge one another, they complement one another, etc., etc. And I just think that's happening way too much. And then there's all like the systemic stuff of like, you know, it being definitely in the UK more financially viable to have a broken family, to have a single parent family than to have two families that are living together, which is completely different to how it used to be. You know, you used to get like stamp duty or whatever, and pay less on taxes and all that sort of stuff from being married. So there was actually benefits to it, to keeping the family unit together. And I think for me, also, just in terms of what I do for a living, we talk a lot about reconciliation. We talk a lot about the main principles of the Children's Act 1989, which are about making no orders. It's about keeping families together. But I don't necessarily think that everything in society is set up for that premise and that purpose. But I digress. So these assisted suicide bill that has now been voted into Parliament that will go into legislation in the next however long. I think previously I probably would have been in agreement with it, that people have a choice to end their own lives if they want to, if there's no quality of life, to end people's suffering, etc., etc. And I'm not necessarily in disagreement with it. I think it just is a little bit scary hearing things like somebody can sign as your proxy and say that that they know you well enough to know that you would want to end your life. So I think about, like parents who are maybe like a burden on their children, who are vulnerable, who aren't able to advocate for themselves, that it just being a bit of an easier option to be like, no, she definitely wants to die. I can see it in her eyes. Or like even scarier, disabled children who are completely nonverbal, whose parents or caregivers or whoever it might be are struggling to care for them, and this seems like a better option. And people can convince themselves of all sorts of stuff, like that, this person has no quality of life, that they're completely locked in their own mind, that they're never going to be able to have the same experiences that we have here on earth, and therefore it's right and it's justified and it's kind actually to end their life. And also the comparison that quality of life is only based upon meeting a certain set of criteria that are determined by us, and what we feel is quality of life is just so arrogant and so conceited that essentially there's no way of knowing with relativity what somebody's purpose here is and what somebody's quality to their own life is. And I think to just simply end it because it doesn't meet our expectations is insane. I think that is insane, and it's really scary, actually, to be perfectly honest. Anyway, the point of this video was not to give any kind of moralistic or sanctimonious view on the ethics of killing one another. The reason I wanted to make this video is because I found it very interesting listening to my mum talk about this and how scared she is about what's happening and what that means and what the long-term consequences, right, of this could be. Her conclusion was that the world has gone to the devil, and the devil is everywhere, and the devil is in all things, and the devil is trying to pierce through society. It's trying to penetrate our moralistic society, and it's very, very scary. But caveat that with the fact that God has a plan. She doesn't know what it is, but he has a plan, and she's just really grateful that she's going to be dead soon and she doesn't have to deal with the fallout of all our evil decisions in this society. Okay, so I'm not really in disagreement that the devil is here, right? I think that Western societies in particular have been penetrated by evil, like I really do. And I think that evil is kind of prolonged and I don't know, yeah, whatever it is, prolonged by all of the information that we get and this like constant perpetual state of fear that we're in the country. and then making decisions out of that fear is probably not the wisest thing to do, right? Because when you're in that state, you can't really think, you can't evaluate, you can't look at everything and make like a objective and well thought out, conscientious decision, right? And I do think that there is some evil shit that goes down, like, hence the reason why the news probably is really negative, right? But what I would say is this, that there's no winning and losing, that the devil isn't winning, that God isn't losing, that God hasn't won overall, that, Jesus died for our sins and therefore whatever happens, it doesn't really matter. What I would say more is this, is that the devil and God, light and dark, good and evil, are all one in the same thing. They live on a continuum, yeah? You cannot know what good is without there being evil. So to know how good you are, you have to be able to compare it to something. And that kind of like duplicity isn't divisive. Like, it's cumulative. So because you cannot have good without evil, because you cannot have beauty without ugly, right? Because one defines the other, it makes each of them equally important, equally relevant. When I think about light and dark, it's like there is never not light. It's just a darker shade of light, because an absence of light is an absence of existence, right? So even when you think about concepts of light and dark, the darkness is just another form of light. It's still the same thing, but maybe expressing itself in a different way. And again, if we didn't know, oh, that's some really dark behavior over there, we wouldn't have anything to compare it to. And on top of that, I feel like my experience my whole life is that you have to go into the dark. You have to go into the dark. You have to admit that you're surrounded by it. You have to see how it's like influenced in your life, in your mind, in your body, and your community and the world and history and the future and all the rest of it. You have to really immerse yourself in it in order to understand its purpose, and in order to be able to see where the light still lives inside that darkness. And when I think about this whole situation with society and whatever else, like, it's a very damning conclusion to make, that the world has just gone to the devil. That's it. Because where do we go from there? Like, now we're just sitting around, victims, lame ducks, waiting for our salvation. Like, yep, the whole world's gone to shit, everything's evil. God, I'm just going to wait around until the second come in, and then everything's going to be okay, right? And in the meantime, I'm going to, recycle and go on marches and, house homeless teenagers. These are all things that my mum does that are really good, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, how does that belief really affect anything? How does it really change anything? For me, I would prefer to believe that actually, and I've said it before in a different video and I'll try and find it and put it up here, but apathy is more the devil in the world. Evil things have always been happening, but the issue is that people have been apathetic towards them. They haven't really cared to do anything, to respond in any way, to make any kind of difference, because you know what? It doesn't really affect them if there are 5-year-old children being trafficked from countries in order to be used like for sexual abuse, like and in parties with crazy people who want to do nuts things to them. Like, they don't really care if money is being laundered and taken off of, developing countries through charity, people, there's a small amount of people that get up in arms about these very specific things, and they make changes and they make movements, but generally the general population don't really give a shit. They're happy to just go to work, to live in their house, to have a roof over their head, to buy their car on HP, to get new trainers, to sit and watch the latest episode of this, that and the other, to be able to talk to people on the phone, to be able to scroll on the internet. This is what they're happy with, and with it comes a level of lethargy and this laissez-faire attitude to evil things that are happening in the world. I've seen recently that there are massive changes to the optics of evil. So I don't know if the devil's got like a new marketing team in or something, which probably has been sent from like top management anyway, and been like, here, use this marketing team, because the whole thing is going on a new strategy now. Everybody thought you were cool, but now people are actually seeing how not cool it is, right? And I think the more that like evil and unrest and darkness and all the rest of it, right, is being brought to the fore, the more that people who would have previously been apathetic are noticing it. And they are saying, oh, wait, hold on. There is a massive issue here. Like, what is happening? Like, I never knew it was this bad. I never even considered that it might be this bad. We're harming one another. We're not connected. What are we doing? Like, what are we doing? And I feel like that's happening all over the world, everywhere. And I feel, unfortunately, it does take for something big to happen, because to every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So if these kind of little things are happening under the surface and you hear a little bit about it sometimes, but you don't really know, and it all could just be a load of bullshit and clickbait and all the rest of it, right? All these terms that we use nowadays. Really, what motivation is there to do anything about it? But I think the stronger that the action is over here, the stronger the reaction is over here. And for me, it's like the dawn of a new time. It's like a renaissance, being on the edge of a revolution, that these things are happening. And yes, they're bad, and yes, they're scary. But if you fall into the fear, rather than seek out the darkness to see how it upholds the light, and you just fall into fear, there is nothing that you can do from that position. There's no change that you can make. There's no power that you can have, because you're now just a victim. I think understanding things from that more macrocosmic viewpoint of like a recognition that there is continual, consistent balance at all times, every day, every year, every millennia. Because if you look at everything over the span of time that is eternity, from wherever it started to wherever it ended, which is probably the same place, right? To this point now, and you don't even know how far on this evolutionary journey our world and our galaxy and everything in it is, right? If you think about absolutely every single thing and person and event that's happened over that period of time, the likelihood is that it probably is pretty balanced, and there probably is an equilibrium of both things, verging more on the side of things being good, because we are good in our essence. We're good in our heart. This is, I think, how they say that we resemble God, because we're good and we're able to manifest good, but we can't do it if we're in fear. And I think there's a need to trust as well that even though things may seem bad, even though things may seem dark, even though things may seem scary, actually there is a bigger picture. And it's impossible to know what that is, and it's possible to know when that's going to come into fruition, but to believe and to see around you movement towards good that may be coming out of movement towards bad. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, something that I feel grateful for in this moment. I feel grateful for life. I feel grateful for my life. I feel grateful that nobody can take that and that I'm not vulnerable. In the same way that some other people might be and might be affected by this. And who knows what my life is going to bring, and who knows how I would feel if I was locked in my own mind without being able to move my body. I think that's probably the worst thing I could ever think of. But at the moment, I would say that I'm grateful for the belief that tomorrow will bring more life, and that whatever's happening, there's a purpose, and there's meaning, and there's goodness from whatever that is, no matter how difficult it may seem, no matter how adverse, no matter what trials and tribulations, that they're all beautiful, you know? And I hope and I pray to be able to hold on to that. Okay, that's it.